Hello, and welcome to uPhilosopher. It's been a while. Been some rough months for everybody. But I'm glad to get to talk with you today because I want to kind of unpack with you something that I think is really important coming up into this election. And so the backstory here is that this show actually started almost 4 years ago. And it started in part because of the 2016 election. I think it's really maybe kind of easy at that point for more conservative viewers to go, oh, well, he must have been so upset about Trump's election that he decided to kind of start his liberal meanderings or something like that. But not really. It was more a matter of that whole election season was so kind of distraught. So many of my interactions with others had become so tense, where I found myself in circumstances where saying things like, well, we should consider the thoughts of others and that we should consider compromise, that even discussion of things like compromise were seen as liberal. And so the first show that we did actually was on whether or not we should compromise. So that situation was such that I just felt that maybe there was an opportunity to try and talk with each other. Kind of the big hope was that, people would respond and that we'd kind of have a dialogue and that we could understand where each person was coming from. I still remain a big believer in that if we have an honest conversation where we all kind of recognize our own flaws, that we may not walk away agreeing, but we can walk away understanding why the other person thinks that they do, rather than just kind of going, oh, well, they must be insane, they must be awful, they must be evil. So in regards to today's conversation, part of the reason why I want to have it is because I think that there's a broader issue that has occurred. And in some ways, I think it's going to sound very much like part of some sort of liberal agenda, but I certainly hope not. That's because that's not where I want to go. But let's talk a little bit about why Donald Trump is so loved, so that even if, say, he loses the popular vote, an important thing to recognize here is we're talking about, I'd say, a solid 30% of the population, at minimum, really, 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 really likes him, loves him, right, is deeply motivated by him. And I want to talk beyond, because there's some important issues that come up, like issues of people who feel like they're not heard, right? Blue-collar workers who feel like they've been ignored, people who feel like they're losing jobs because of other energy initiatives, so on and so forth, that these groups of people feel unheard, silenced, ignored, and I think all of that's important, and the president speaks to them for sure. But I want to speak to a kind of more conceptual issue that was something I kind of realized when I noticed what was happening with straws, drinking straws. And I found it really, really, really interesting, because I think really what's happened is there is a sense in which President Trump, whether or not he wins or loses the election, will continue to reverberate as a kind of almost a founder of a new religious paradigm. If we look at kind of religious beliefs as ones that are not just about kind of like a metaphysical concept, but as a concept that has to do with what makes people feel good about themselves, what makes people feel forgiven, and what makes people feel directed, right? So anyways, the point being is, it seemed really odd to me that when there was this kind of move towards not using plastic straws, which in a lot of ways makes a lot of sense, right? Plastic straws, empirically speaking, research, as far as the research is concerned, do a whole lot of environmental damage. And, hard to recycle, they this microplastics issue. Anyways, lots of empirical research to suggest they're bad. Now, I don't know about you, but I cannot stand paper straws at all. At all. And they're just kind of porous and they feel weird. I just don't like them. And it seemed to me that there's probably a fair number of other people who feel that way too. Like they just want their straw, they want their plastic straw. They don't want to have to carry a straw around. Like metal straws, there's always this worry that, you're walking, you have your drink with a metal straw and you're going to fall and just like impale yourself through the head. The silicone ones seem to me to kind of feel the most like the plastic ones. But again, who wants to have to like clean their straw, so on and so forth. So anyways, the point being is, there was this push, certain companies, like Starbucks, so on and so forth, pushed to not be using these straws because there was just so much research to suggest that it was deeply environmentally problematic. And then there was this push back, particularly from like conservative media. People are trying to take your straws. People want you to be unhappy. They're trying to destroy your life. And it was just interesting to me because it seems that there's a really easy kind of solution to the whole problem, which is just to not use a straw. And don't get me wrong, there might be people who literally, for some physical reason, have to. There might be lots of reasons where you're like, well, I'm a trucker and I'm usually on the road and it just makes my life a lot easier. Reduces my chances of spilling while driving. So I'm not suggesting that there aren't reasons. What I'm suggesting is, in general, right, my solution to the problem is to just not use a straw, right? And okay, so potentially on my end, mildly inconvenient, but there seems to be this kind of weighing aspect to it. I recognize that, well, I could be participating in something that does larger harm to a larger kind of environmental ecosystem, people, so on and so forth. Or I can have something that I found mildly convenient, right? I might as well just inconvenience myself a bit. Like, what's the big deal? But I thought it was really interesting because the president's website started selling straws. And that really spoke to me, because what I realized at that moment is that what Donald Trump is selling as a concept to people is he's selling, and forgive me for this because it's going to sound a little harsh, what he's selling is it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to put yourself first. And in little ways, right? In ways that are kind of non-relevant to big stuff in your life, right? I mean, there's a lot of times where we have to make really, really big decisions, but things like, kind of like straws and stuff like that, they're just not that big a deal. And if you think about it, with a lot of kind of these smaller kind of environmental things, like bring your own bag or something to Walmart, there's not really all that much of a negative impact. It's just a little bit of an inconvenience, something that I have to get used to. But if you look at the kind of holism of Donald Trump's message, is it's okay to have what you want the way that you want it now. You shouldn't have to change. You shouldn't have to grow. It's okay to have it in this very kind of self-focused way. Now, don't misunderstand. There are many people to whom Donald Trump appeals who themselves are very, very underprivileged. They don't have much money, right? And so to say, oh, well, this is a philosophy of selfishness, is to say to someone who doesn't have many financial opportunities, well, you should be willing to pay more money for a canvas bag and stuff like that. And I think that there's a fair criticism there of what I'm saying. But that being said, if we look at the holism of what's happening here, it is things like you should get to have whatever straw you want. Don't worry about the environment. You should get to have your gas guzzling truck if you want it, right? You get to have your guns if you want it. And think about the guns issue, for instance. To everyone that I'm speaking with, right, there really isn't a concern that they're about to take their semi-automatic weapon and start killing a bunch of people. That's not the worry. The realization is that when we are against these gun laws, what we're really talking about is not whether or not I get to have it, but whether or not other people have this kind of easy access to it. In other words, I seem to be unwilling to give up as easy access to the things that I want because I know that I am a safe, reasonable gun owner. I'm unwilling to give that up, even though it might help make other people safe from other dangerous people, right? The COVID mask thing is the perfect example of it. It seems super weird to me that people who are like, listen, I get to open carry, and the reason why is because I want to be able to keep myself safe. It is a matter of safety. Are often the same people who are like, don't tell me to wear a mask, which is arguably a matter of keeping yourself safe, but let's be honest, is a matter of keeping other people safe. It's really, really, really weird to realize how many of us are unknowing murderers at this point. How many of us have, without any intention whatsoever, and maybe even were relatively careful, maybe I wore my mask or something like that, but still ended up carrying the virus, ended up giving it to someone who gave it to someone who gave it to someone who killed someone as a result. So what we're talking about then is a kind of gesture towards absolution, towards forgiveness. It's okay to have what you want when you want it. It doesn't really matter if my wanting to have these easy access to guns results in the fact that this other person has easier access to guns, and as a result, they kill a bunch of people. It doesn't matter if I don't have the virus and I'm healthy and I'm young and so on and so forth. I don't want to have to wear the mask, even though my getting it may not kill me, but might end up killing somebody else. I don't want to have to use my straw. I don't want to have to be more careful about gas mileage. I don't want to have to carpool. I don't want to have to do all of these things. When we really think about it, those issues are not deeply philosophical issues, right? These are just kind of issues of our daily lives and not wanting to have to be inconvenienced in a lot of cases. Not always. Some of them are bigger. Arguably, someone might argue that gun rights is a bigger issue given the Constitution, and I think there's a fair criticism there. That being said, if we're talking about kind of a religious icon, what we realize is if we look at the history of religion, is that there's a Darwinian notion to that. What I mean is, and I'm not dismissing anyone's actual spirituality, but we have to recognize the fact that the religion that has the most people doesn't by default mean that it is, in fact, the right religion. We know this, in fact, if you happen to be Christian and you believe you have the right religion, right, the right religious belief, well, Christianity is not the majority religion by any stretch worldwide, right? So if it's some sort of numbers game where the largest group of people worshiping must mean that that is the fact, right, the religion, that's correct, well then, at least by the Christian belief set, right, we would know that that, in fact, is incorrect. What's interesting, though, is you go, well, what attracts people to a religion? It may not just be like the rightness, like the metaphysical correctness of that religion. Maybe it's kind of beyond the scope of this conversation. But I can say with fair comfortability that the ability of a religion to be kind of transmitted to others has a lot of certain kind of qualities to it that have to do with kind of the survivability. That's why I'm saying it's Darwinian, the survivability of that religion. So what I mean is, like, for example, if a religion requires that people get circumcised, it's harder to convert people to that religion, just kind of by default. And so that's arguably one of the reasons why Christianity ended up being kind of wider spread, right, than Judaism, right? There's also the issue of, like, well, if to be part of a religion, you have to practice a series of rituals, and you have to do these rituals, and you have to do them right, and you have to do them every day. It becomes harder and harder to kind of convince people to follow it. That's not to say that a lot of religions that have like deep spiritual, rigorous, ritualistic requirements, it's not to say that they don't often become incredibly popular and grow and grow in some cases even larger than Christianity. I'm just saying in general, like, if you're trying to sell a belief set, there's a couple of things that come into play, and that's one of them. But other things that come into play are things like, what are the benefits of practicing this religion, right? And it seems to me that there's a couple of them. One of which is a life after life, right? So you're going to be able to win out at the end of the day over like Greek gods and a Greek pantheonic or Roman pantheon religious notion. If your religious notion is saying, oh yeah, but after you die, you definitely get this afterlife, and by the way, it's glorious, right? Well, that's a pretty good selling point. And you're probably going to be able to beat out, the Greek pantheon if you're like, no, 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 no. Some of these gods that you're describing, like they don't like you, they don't care about you. No, there's really only one, and that one genuinely loves you. Okay, well that's a pretty good selling point too, right? So there's this realization that if we're going to get people to follow a kind of religious belief set, in other words, we're going to, people want directedness, right? They want something that makes them feel good about who they are, that they're doing the right thing. But there's also the issue of people don't like feeling guilty. Let's just be super frank, right? I mean, that's one of the things that's most dislikable about me is that I have a really bad habit of kind of pointing out things like, oh, well, we could be doing this to help the environment. We could be doing this to help marginalized populations, right? We could be doing this to like save aluminum foil and reduce the usage of it. Like whatever it happens to be, it's really annoying. I'm sure the people around me just cannot stand it. And we just don't want to feel guilty. We don't want to feel responsible. And if you look at it, really some of the most popular religious beliefs in the world involve this ability to find some way to absolve yourself for the things that you do, whether it's confession, or notice the even greater popularity of Protestantism than Catholicism. Maybe part of the reason why Protestantism became even more popular is by virtue of the fact that it doesn't require that you have to go physically to someone to confess to be forgiven. You can do that directly between you and God. And again, I'm only looking at these in purely like socio-cultural ways, right? Leaving aside the rightness or wrongness, the metaphysical truth of a religion, just kind of like what gets people to kind of buy them in some cases and believe and change to convert, so on and so forth. So the point being is well, the connection that I'm trying to make is if we look at what Trump is selling, well, the president is selling a religious belief in a sense, right? It provides directedness, you get to feel good about yourself, and you get to feel not guilty in an even broader way than, okay, well, if you believe this thing, you're forgiven for your sins, right? It is literally a philosophy that says, by having money and spending money and spoiling yourself, you're not a bad person. Thinking about you and only you and voting just for you means that you're not a bad person. So, to me, that's really interesting because that's a hard system to beat. At the end of the day, right, if conservatives are saying, listen, you get to do you and think about you and focus on yourself, and liberals keep saying, well, you need to think about some of this broader stuff, like look at this other group of people that you're going to impact, that's a hard sell. And one that I recognize in terms of, I've been arguing for a while that people need to vote not just for themselves, they need to vote for others. Insofar as when I vote, well, maybe I'm not gay, but I should think about what it would feel like to not be able to get married if I was gay and how much that would hurt, right? I want to think about again, to the best of my ability, I obviously can't really understand it, but like how much it must really suck to not be able to drive without worrying about being pulled over because I'm black, right? In other words, when I vote, thinking about more than myself, and that, by the way, includes like, well, if I'm, a blue-collar, working class individual who feels ignored and marginalized and blamed for the state of the country when in negative terms, right? Like, there's a lot of people out there who are shopping at Walmart who feel like they're taking the blame for every problem of the country, ranging from sexism to racism, as if it's just them by themselves that, and they're like, I don't even have much power. I don't even have much money. What are you talking about? Right? Well, our ability then to be able to do that makes our vote more powerful. It actually is in the politician's best interest for us each to vote individually and selfishly. In other words, selfishly in terms of it's about myself and about nobody else. When we vote in ways that involve thinking about others, we become a much more powerful, well-connected voting bloc that's harder to break apart into pieces and kind of disperse. You become more of a unified voice. And so it seems to me that there is a lot of that attempt by politicians to kind of break us apart. Well, anyways, to kind of wrap this whole thing up, that I guess really the point that I want to get to is there's a lot of danger here. There's a lot of danger. If you've gone all the way 20 minutes in, first of all, thank you. And second of all, there's something to recognize in terms of the danger for our country. regardless of whether or not Donald Trump wins. We have, as a people, become much angrier with each other. I mean, we were pretty angry in 2016. This is worse. I've never seen it like this. And forgive me for this because this sounds very biased, but there's a sense in which I genuinely believe that the dialogue that President Trump engages, leaving aside policy and all of that, but the actual way that he speaks has infected all of us, conservative, liberal, everyone alike. In other words, I've noticed that everyone seems more venomous, more willing to say mean things, to not really think about other people when they say them. And there's a lot, I've noticed that there's a lot of good people on the liberal side who are very willing to make fun of, make nasty comments about people on the right. And of course, vice versa. It was interesting to me to learn that studies show that liberals are currently a little bit more likely to cut someone out of their lives because they are conservative, though conservatives are just less likely to have the liberal friend in the first place. But both of those are kind of sad, and in terms like we are human beings who can be connected and need each other, and at the end of the day, everyone, if it's true, think about it from either side, conservative, liberal. Both sides are trying to say that there's something important that matters, that they themselves should be heard, or that there's some group of people or some important right or some important concept about the country that should be preserved, that should be protected, that should be respected. Very, very few people are coming into this just trying to hate other people, but we're treating each other like we are, as if the whole point of the other side is just hate. Maybe there's some politicians who manipulate that and use that. I'm not going to argue about that. But I think we can say with fair confidence that there's a lot of people, probably a vast majority on both sides, who really believe that they're right and really believe that the other side is not listening. So the only way that I know how to deal with that is for all of us to recognize the very real possibility that we might be wrong. That includes me. That's probably where I need to start, right? My more liberal leanings, they can be incorrect. It is entirely possible. I might be missing something. And my ability to recognize that means that I might be able to listen to someone who has conservative leanings with more patience, kindness, compassion, and love. I'll be super frank. I don't understand the point of any of it if it is not to achieve a more loving, compassionate, and kind society, family, friendship, interaction with others. I mean, why are we all here? I mean, what's the point? You can make all the money in the world, you're still going to die. It's not going to save you. You know, you can have all the cool stuff in the world, you're still going to die. It's not going to save you. You know, none of it really does all that much, whether it's politics or gun rights or any of it. Doesn't really matter that much if there isn't gentleness, kindness, and compassion. And I think we all kind of know that. And I don't know. Anyways, I'm just kind of meandering at this point. Point being is, I guess if we're really lucky, this will be our last show. Maybe I'll be wrong, right? And then we will take a deep breath. Recognize that everyone's deserving of love, and that our ability on both sides to start acting like, well, someone, because of their belief or their actions or the way that they think, isn't deserving of love. Our tendency to do that is exactly what we accuse the other side of doing. It's exactly why we're saying the other side is bad. So, anyways, with that, please vote. And maybe even more importantly, take the opportunity to share love, and to share it with someone, maybe just throwing it out there, with someone who disagrees with you. Anyway, sorry to be all preachy. I hope you have a wonderful week.